All right, let's dive right in. We're going to tackle a huge question today. What is the real engine of a country's economic growth? Is it something we can actually tweak and control, almost like turning a dial? Or is the truth a whole lot more complicated? Okay, so here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at the basic idea of a growth engine. Then, we'll explore a really powerful theory from an economist named Paul Romer. After that, we'll see what happens when that beautiful theory kind of crashes into reality, and how another economist, Charles Jones, came along to try and fix it. Then, we're going to flip the script and look at innovation as a form of destruction before trying to figure out which of these big ideas actually makes the most sense. So, let's get the foundation right. Economists have long been obsessed with something called endogenous growth theory. It's a fancy term for a pretty simple idea that real, long-lasting economic growth comes from forces inside a country, things like new ideas, innovation, skilled people, not from some random outside shock.
And this leads to a really wild question. If growth really is an inside job, could a government just decide it wants to grow at 4% a year instead of 2%? Could they just pull the right levers and make it happen?
This is where our story really gets going. Back in 1990, the economist Paul Romer came out with this absolutely revolutionary model. It was elegant, it was powerful, and it seemed to give a crystal clear answer to that exact question. At the very heart of Romer's theory was this concept you see here, the scale effect. The best way to think about it is to imagine the economy as a big growth machine. Romer's big idea was that if you ramp up the inputs, say you double the number of scientists, you'll get a proportional output of new ideas, which directly puts the pedal to the metal on economic growth. The conclusion was just so simple and intuitive, you couldn't help but love it. More researchers means faster growth. Full stop. It really suggested that, yeah, a country could choose its own destiny. And the logic just seemed unbreakable, right? Step 1, you increase the number of brilliant minds working on problems. Step 2, they generate more new ideas. Step 3, that speeds up technology. And boom, step 4, you get a permanently higher growth rate. It was a beautiful, powerful theory. But there's always a but. And that but is reality. Because when other economists started digging into the real-world data, Romer's elegant model hit a massive, inconvenient wall. So get this. In the United States, the number of people working in R&D pretty much tripled between the 1950s and the late 1980s, a 3x increase. According to Romer's model, the economy should have gone into hyperdrive. But the data tells a completely different story. It's actually kind of shocking when you see it visually. On one side, you have the number of researchers going through the roof. But on the other side, the economic growth rate, it just stayed flat. Stubbornly, totally flat. And that, right there, is the huge conflict. The theory predicted growth should be accelerating like a rocket ship. The facts showed that even though we threw 3 times as many researchers at the problem, the rate of productivity growth didn't budge. That all-important scale effect, well, it was nowhere to be found. So, was the whole theory just wrong? Well, not exactly. This is where another economist, Charles Jones, stepped in. He came up with a really clever way to fix the model so it would match the data. The only problem, his fix kind of took all the magic out of it. What Jones did was he went into the model's engine room and tweaked the math on how new ideas are created. And this subtle change had a huge consequence. It completely erased the scale effect. In his updated model, long-term growth wasn't driven by the number of researchers anymore, but by population growth. And just like that, the model fit the data perfectly. But the powerful, simple story was gone. So this created a massive new puzzle. If government policies like subsidizing research and development can't permanently speed up the growth rate, then are they useless? Is all that money we spend on science just going down the drain? Okay, so this is the absolute key distinction. Romer's scale effect was like pointing your whole economy on a permanently steeper upward path. Jones's level effect is different. It's more like a one-time boost. The path itself doesn't get steeper forever, but the entire path gets shifted up to a higher level. So you don't grow faster forever, but you do end up permanently richer. But hold on, there's a completely different way to look at this whole thing. See, both Romer's and Jones's models basically assume that innovation is about accumulation. We just keep adding new ideas to a big pile. But what if that's not the full story? What if innovation is just as much about subtraction? And this brings us to a whole other family of economic models, inspired by the legendary Joseph Schumpeter. The core idea is right there on the slide. New ideas replace old ideas. Innovation isn't just about creating the new, it's about destroying the old. Schumpeter had a fantastic name for this: creative destruction. It's this never-ending, churning cycle where new technologies and new companies emerge and just wipe out the old ones. Think about how streaming services made video rental stores extinct, or how smartphones made a whole drawer of other gadgets totally irrelevant. And if you believe this is how the world works, it has some pretty intense real-world consequences. It means that in a healthy, dynamic economy, you should actually expect to see more businesses failing and more people switching jobs. And for the innovators themselves, it means you're constantly looking over your shoulder, terrified that your amazing idea is about to be made obsolete by the next big thing. So where does that leave us? We've got two modern, sophisticated theories on the table: Jones's tweaked model and these Schumpeterian models of creative destruction. And what's so fascinating is that both of them managed to solve our original data puzzle, why growth is constant even with more researchers, but they tell wildly different stories about how the economy actually ticks.
Let's just put them head to head. In the world according to Jones, innovation is a nice, orderly process of accumulation, and long-term growth is tied to population. But in the Schumpeterian world, innovation is a chaotic battle where new ideas replace old ones. And here's the real mindbender. In this world, that very threat of being wiped out can actually reduce the incentive for people to innovate in the first place.
And this is really the key takeaway. Both of these advanced theories get us to the same place in terms of explaining the data, but they give us two totally different roadmaps for how innovation actually happens. And that has massive implications for everything from business strategy to government policy. You can see that the Schumpeterian model adds these extra crucial dimensions to the picture. How much effort we put into research isn't just about population. It's this delicate balance between the potential profit from a new idea, the size of that idea, and, critically, that constant nagging fear that your creation will soon be obsolete. Which leaves us with one final fascinating question to think about. If economic growth really is a process of creative destruction, this turbulent, unpredictable storm of the new replacing the old, then how can policymakers ever hope to manage it effectively? How do you steer a hurricane? That right there is the billion-dollar question that economists are still debating today.